In this week's video, I show you how I put together and fabricated a bracket for this that allows me to have it bend vertically or horizontally. So let's get into it. Alright, so this is my initial plan for this build. What I'm going to do is build a plate adapter bracket here, be 3.5 by 4 inches with the 3/4 inch holes in it. And I'm kind of up in the air how I want to do this, but what I'm thinking is to build a square frame around that adapter plate, which will allow me to have a pivot point at the top you can see here, working from horizontal to vertical. And then I'm going to need some kind of bracket with 2 fixed holes in it to lock it into place when it's horizontal or vertical. So let's get started with this bracket, and yeah, we'll go for there. Alright, so here's the adapter plate that I made, and you'll notice that it looks a little bit different from the prints that I drew up, and that's because when I was out here just playing around to see how I need to make those mounting brackets that are going to be welded to the table, I discovered that, and now let me set this down real quick and I'll show you, that because the threads are so long on this, I needed to make an offset so that I could still fully tighten these, but have this be clear, that so when I box this up with that tubing, I have a nice handle and I don't have to worry about this interfering with anything when I weld that to it, because it's a 2x1 piece of tubing and it would have either hit this bolt or this one if I would have put it on there, and I wouldn't have felt good about how strong it was. So I just cut some more 3/8 plate, tacked it on there, and just to show you that we don't need TIG or gas metal arc welding for everything we do, I'm going to go ahead and weld the rest of this project up with my old Miller-Matic Thunderbolt. And so let's pop this off real quick, put some welds on here, and we'll go from there. Alright, so we got the first pass done on each side. Now I'm just going to do a weave over top of the stringer with my 70-18 rod, and we'll see how that turns out. Alright, so overall, pretty happy with the welds on here. You can see there's a few spots where my weave back and forth, I didn't hold the toes long enough and I got a little bit of underfill in some spots, but overall, for just giving this a whirl on my Thunderbolt with a few 70-18s, doing a stringer and then a weave over top, I'm super happy with how it came out, and super square still. So now that we got this going, we will put it on my bender and start figuring out how we're going to frame this in the box, and then build the mechanism that will allow us to actually rotate this from pointing vertical up, bending, to bending horizontally. Alright, so I got my brackets cut out and ready to go, and what's going to happen is that these are going to be welded like this, holding themselves up. And unfortunately, since I've been changing so much on this as I've been going along, I'm actually scrapping the whole idea of completely boxing this in for a handle. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to have to cut out a few extra pieces and extend this bracket that holds onto the bender itself down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is take this piece here, cut it down, shape it just a little bit on the plasma cutter so that you can see when these overlap, it'll be just enough to give me a bolting location for this to this new bracket. But that's kind of the fun thing and crappy thing about doing stuff just kind of on the fly and, you know, changing the plans as you go because you have a better idea, is that you have to make a few alterations and you're going to do, you know, multiple cuts where I could have probably just done this piece in a single cut if I had enough foresight. But either way, it's going to come out pretty good, I think. And I'll jump back onto the video once we get to a point where I start welding all these tabs and stuff together. And then we will do a test fit on the table, and then we will weld everything to the table. So let's do it. All right, so I took the bracket off, but you see we got it finished up here where these will bolt onto the tabs that I just welded on, and then this will allow it to be welded to the table here, and then we'll have this pivot point up top. So let's go ahead and get this tacked up and see what it looks like. All right, so we got the brackets tacked on here. So that 3-inch piece is going to then be welded here on the inside and outside for both sides. And you'll see I already cut one of these a little bit shorter, but I need to cut this bolt before I do the finished assembly. But you'll see that this will allow me to fold it down to where this will then bend vertical. And then if I'm doing a complex bend or a bend that's too large for that, I can then loosen these up, flip it up, and then this will allow my bender to bend in this direction. So I'm going to fully weld these up and we'll go from there. Alright, so we got the welds finished up on the inside and outside of both parts. Came out pretty good. I mean, when it comes to welding with 7018s, these things are like butter, man, and it just fills into the joint really easy and makes it pretty easy to weld these. And I even wrapped the corners just to make sure we don't have any high stress areas where this weld could fail. But for what this is definitely overkill for what I actually need. So let's go ahead and get it bolted on and see what it looks like. Alright, so we got everything fabbed up and attached to the table, and you can see holds at 90, holds it horizontal, so it's a little off on the horizontal just because you'll see I went away from the plate that I initially wanted to build, and what I did instead was just weld some bolts and some nuts onto this. And what this lets me do is when I rotate it, it will actually come into contact with the bracket and stop itself. So with that being said, it's not quite perfectly vertical this direction, and it's not quite perfectly horizontal, so I'm going to play with the bolts themselves. I might do a little bit of welding on them to build them up, take a little bit off to let it sit flatter, but overall I'm happy with how it works, and for what I'll be using this for, it's going to be perfect for me. So let's get this fully assembled and make sure it works when it's at full. Alright, so we got it all finished up here, and real quick we're just going to hook some air up to it, make sure it works, and then I'll talk you through a few of the things that I need to adjust just a little bit so I get this to work properly. And there's full stroke length there. So if I unhook this real quick, at full stroke length, if I pop this up, we still have plenty of room for it to be horizontal or vertical when we're bending. So you can see it's not perfect. It's a little off being 90 degrees straight up, but for what I'm using it for, it's going to work perfect. And the only other thing that I need to do to make this work is that when I do flip this up to the horizontal position, since this is on the back, it wants to fall back right away. So two things I'm going to do, or that I could do, is I might just get some locking washers for this big 3/4 inch bolt, and then I just lock it into place for whatever position I keep it in, and then my dead stops will still work to get me where I need to go. Hold it, lock it in, and we should be good to go there. If that doesn't work and it starts to slip from the vibration of the ram moving, I'll just do another nut on the back here and then have something to hold this from going down any farther once it's in its fully upright position. But this is my idea of the perfect tube bending table. So you can see we got big heavy duty 3x3 square tubing, 3/8 wall with a big piece of aluminum on top. And even when it's standing up, there's plenty of gap between the two, so I can keep it up without having any issues. And this is something I've wanted to build for a long time, so I got some tubing on the way, and hopefully we'll see in a few videos me actually bending this stuff up. So like always, like and subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any questions or suggestions for things I can do to make this better. But we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.